Thanks for staying with Newsnet. Well, here's something that has been making conversation since yesterday. The Malusi Gigaba sex tape being widely shared on social media. The video surfacing on Twitter and soon made its way across various platforms. However, there are important questions, especially around social media, which it raises. Is it a violation of the Home Affairs Minister's privacy? And what should we keep in mind, especially for those who have been sharing that video? Technology attorney from Swift Tech Law, Russell Luck, joins me to discuss it further. Russell, good evening. The minister is certainly an individual who is, of course, of public interest for obvious reasons. But what should we bear in mind, especially given how topical an issue this has been, when we, number one, watch the video or when we share the video? Are there any legal implications for that?
Hi, Kathy. Thanks for having me. Well, I think the South African public should know a few things. Firstly, I think people have gotten caught up in the sense that Minister Gigaba is similar to, say, the Monica Lewinsky, Bill Clinton scandal in the United States. And there's a big difference, being that what two consenting adults do in the privacy of their own bedroom is actually nobody else's business but their own. And presuming that the tape was intended for Minister Gigaba's significant other, then really he was very unfortunate to have his cell phone hacked, if that is indeed what happened, because these things are, technically speaking, unsubstantiated right now. And also, you can actually commend him for not bowing to the requests and the extortionate demands of the hackers. So from that point of view, he's a victim of this, and it's a very sad situation.
But are there any legal implications for people who then go ahead and share that video with each other, whether it's on WhatsApp or, as we've seen, distributed on Twitter, on Facebook?
Absolutely, Kathy. So South Africa has an omnibus legislative framework, and at the moment we have legislation protecting various parts of transactions in cyberspace. The Electronic Communications and Transactions Act recognizes data as something that's legally protectable. So any video or audio or text content is protectable. And at the moment, the Cybercrimes Bill and Fullman Publications Act are busy being amended in order to deal with specific instances of things like sexting and revenge porn. And at the moment, our common law body of case law and crimen injuria regulates and prohibits the sharing of content such as this. So every person who receives the content and then forwards it to somebody else essentially denigrates and seriously affects the dignity of Minister Gigaba, and technically they would be liable to legal recourse by Minister Gigaba.
And of course, then the other end of the spectrum is that it would be practically impossible to track down every single person that has done that, but certainly something to keep in mind. But in terms of the hacking, we know that hacking is one of those phenomena, especially in a technology space, which costs billions of US dollars for big corporations. You know, we can see what happened with the Facebook scandal. But for an individual like Minister Gigaba, how would his phone be hacked? Just perhaps very simply for us, are there ideas that you've been thinking around or playing around that are plausible or likely?
Yes, well, as you know, experts in the space, sadly, we see a lot of hacking incidents, a lot of cybercrime incidents. So without knowing the details, malware and malware attacks are a very common way of hacking a telephone. In other words, malicious software gets passed either through email attachments or as Easter eggs or embedded within applications that people download. And once they download it onto the device, all the data on that device can then be retrieved. And of course, functionality like GPS location, camera location, etc., can also be manipulated. There are also things like man-in-the-middle attacks, which are hackers will sit between two entry points of data transmission links and try and intercept those, the data being transferred, and seize it that way. And other than social media platforms like WhatsApp and Signal, which are end-to-end encryption devices, people should be very aware that they are vulnerable, and hackers have incredibly sophisticated ways of getting hold of your devices.
So how then do we protect ourselves? Or perhaps that's the next step of the question. Is there a way of telling whether or not your phone has been hacked? What advice would you give all of us tonight that we can quickly check online to see if in fact our devices are one of those that's at risk?
Well, there's no catch-all or surefire way of preventing hacking. And my personal view that I advise people is that if the Pentagon's going to get hacked, and if NASA's going to get hacked, and the biggest institutions in the world are going to get hacked, sadly, at some juncture, people are going to be victims of hacking. But basic things you can do to avoid this are, number one, get an end-to-end encryption device when sending and receiving information, such as WhatsApp or Signal versus, say, email communications or Skype communications or Facebook Messenger communications. The second thing is you can use a virtual private network or VPN in order that when you are surfing the net or when you are transacting in cyberspace, that your actual IP address and detail is concealed. And then thirdly, having very strong encrypted firewalls and the latest antivirus software in order to try and prevent these things from happening.
All right. And certainly I imagine that all of this is stuff that we would be able to find in the App Store or in the, a Play Store. Or where do we find all of this?
Excellent question, Kathy. So right now and for free, you could go to something like a Thor VPN, or if you Google the words VPN, which stands for Virtual Private Network, what you would do is download the software. There are many ones that are very good. And what you would then do is next time you are browsing the internet, you would go via the VPN and do your normal searches that way. And in so doing, you would be anonymous and anonymized. Also, Google has a function on Google Chrome called Incognito. It's also free. You just switch to the incognito mode, and then your details are essentially disguised. And in terms of your antivirus, you can use various packages which are free or paid for. McAfee and Norton, for example, are paid antivirus packages. Avast is a free antivirus package, which is quite good. And then, of course, just use common sense. For example, don't use what we call dirty connections. In other words, if you're in your coffee shop, like your Vida e-cafes or your airport terminals and things like that, and they ask if you would like to switch to the mobile networks, don't switch to the mobile networks. That's the most common place where man-in-the-middle attacks happen. In other words, various hackers are sitting there trying to intercept your communications and get hold of your device.
What happens to all that free Wi-Fi then, Russell?
I know. Sadly, we're going to, you've got to balance it out. Your freedom versus a slight premium that you're going to pay for your freedom.
All right. Thank you so much for coming on to Newsnight. That information really, really very useful for all of us to keep in mind. So that interview, of course, will be available on our YouTube channel if you want to listen back to it and find out what you can do to further protect yourself
Kathy.
from
Great
hacking. Technology attorney Russell Luck, and he's from Swift Tech Law.